Hello everyone, my name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today on the new feature overview of Bitwig's latest update, which is version 5.3. We've got a lot to cover and I'm going to try to blast through it as quickly as possible, talk about my thoughts, talk about a future wish list and blah blah blah. And yeah, if you're a nerd about Bitwig, then just kind of chill out and have some fun with me while I explain what's new. If you are new to the channel, I would love it if you subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Liking the video also doesn't cost you anything, though I know it's kind of a big ask these days, but anything and everything helps. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and talk about what's new. The first thing that I want to jump into is the master recording. Because I think that it could be a bug, or I'm not really sure, but I want to talk about the pros and cons of this. The thing about this is that if you're part of my channel and you've hung around me for a bit, you know that I'm the biggest proponent of what is called rolling sampler. And what rolling sampler does is it is constantly listening and taking a recording of anything that comes through whatever track I put this on. So if I were to play something, you can see that this is going, it saves to my RAM, and I can take a selection and drag it out into the timeline. So Bitwig has kind of added something relatively similar to it. I want to talk about the differences and why this might be advantageous to you, but I also think that there's a bug. So as Bitwig 5.3, what we have is something called the master recording. And if you toggle this button on, then what it's going to do is create a new sample. And even though the track isn't playing, I can kind of do the same thing, right? And if I hit stop, then this will create a new track for me. Now, the thing that I'm not really sure about is if I toggle behind playing and not playing, it seems to not add to the sample. So if I were to play just this like sketch that we were doing while we were messing with some of the new stuff, and I toggle this on, please disregard the idea. That's just something I was messing around with. But if I continue to play sounds, then it seems like it doesn't take that. It only took what seemed to be the main beat, I guess, if you will. So I'm not really sure if that's on purpose and whatnot. It's something to be aware of to start and stop the recording, but hopefully that fixes that, so that way I can kind of toggle between hitting play and not hitting play. But the reason why this is actually in some cases better than rolling sampler is because this does not have a time limit. With rolling sampler, even though it's very precise and being able to take selections out of the timeline and stuff, you can only have a maximum of 10 minutes. But if you're doing a sound design jam or something, and let's say for whatever reason you capture a moment that's really cool and you don't have rolling sampler, well, you can kind of take that jam, and this makes a lot of sense, especially with using something in the clip launcher. But you can take all that stuff and then it will go into a folder that you can later recall. And what I like is that they've provided an immediate access to say, hey, where is this folder? It tells you exactly where it is, and that's pretty handy. That being said, it would be nice if the solution was a little bit more elegant in a means of, for one, the toggling. It would be nice if you can just have that on and have it always listen and save to the RAM as opposed to saving directly to the disk. But I understand that, you know what I mean? It's not, we're most likely never going to have a native rolling sampler built in, and that needs to be okay. Use both. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some of the other cool stuff. I've already kind of given away some of the cool sounds, but we actually have several new devices that are drums. So I've already played some of the processed versions of this, and I guess since I've already done that, I think that it's a really good point to mention that while these drums are basic drum machines, with just a little bit of processing, you can make any of these actually sound really good. That being said, if you know how to shape drums, then you can turn anything into a drum. But these are a great head start. And I love the way that these sound, especially this is labeled as mecha snare, but this is just the V0 snare. Because it has a shell and ringing, it has metallic stuff that's built into it. So that's just one of my personal favorites. But what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a very kind of brief run through of what all of these sound like, and then I'll turn these back on so you can hear the before and after. So this is the version 0, which is the digital drums. The V1 kit is the original E series of drums. The V8 is modeled after an 808, and the V9 is modeled after a 909. So let's go ahead and jump through the V0 stuff. Yeah, sounds really good. And like I said, with just a little bit of processing, I mean, even just looking at this, I have a distortion, which I guess distortion and filter, and then a compressor plus, and then a clipper. But look at how much of a donk that creates. The same thing with the snare. I've got a little bit more processing on here. I have masterclasses on how to design drums both in Bitwig and Faceplan if you want to check that on my website. But even still, just looking at what this is, we went from, let me group this to this. And that's why I say like this is such a good starting point of changing this. And what's also really nice is that you can get a bunch of different timbres and stuff just by changing the shell and the ringing or the tuning, all that stuff. But it just, dude, it sounds great. This is by far my favorite drum device that has been added just because of that. Lots of really cool classic, like neuro stuff that you can add. So let's go ahead and take a look at the V8 stuff. And I'm just going to kind of run through what this sounds like. I'm also a really big fan of this. It's just really handy to have a very quick access to a shaker device, which you can technically create with the hi-hat stuff, but I really just like this in general. Yeah, this is pretty standard, but add some saturation to it and you'll be good to go. The 909 kit sounds great. I really like the kick and snare. And something else that I really like about this is this interface. I hope that Bitwig adds more color variation to their device interfaces outside of just the outlines and the colors and whatnot. What I mean by that is if you look at some of their native devices, let me find one. This is really cool with the face or the font and then the knobs. If I can make one request about this, aside from what I just mentioned, please bring back the rainbow knobs. Give us the option to toggle it on and off. I don't know why they took it off. Maybe some people complained about it, but those things were so cool. And yeah, all right. I've been asking that ever since they got rid of it, but that thing was so dope. Anyway, back to the other drums. We also have that 909, so I'll just play through these. If I hadn't already gone through that. But yeah, these sound great. And there's enough to where you don't have to put a ton of work into getting a solid drum sound, but there is a lot that you can do with the effects and the processing in order to get like really heavy stuff. For example, one thing that I did, which is very simple, I took the V8 kick and then added just nothing but distortion and a little bit of low pass filtering, and we have a very decent sounding 808. Sounds great. One thing that I hope that they add, which they don't have on any of the new devices, is the tuning. If you look here, you can see that at the bottom it says tuning minus 3.44, whereas the original E-series devices actually tell you what pitch it is. I think that that's going to come, but that's just like one thing that I picked up on that I noticed that I would like to see changed in the future. Okay, so that covers the drums. The next thing that I want to talk about is the other big thing, which I think most people are going to be excited about, and that is sequencer. Sorry, it's called Stepwise. They probably figured that that's what we were going to type in, so it's nice that they kind of were like, is this what you mean? So the sequencer is an 8-lane sequencer, and we've got a few features that we can cover. There are some quirks with this. There's also one very key feature that I hope that they add, and I'll kind of mention it as it comes up. But basically, you can toggle this and paint notes, and then if you click this again, you can kind of clear them all, which is kind of nice. You have the velocity here that you can change, and then you also have the timing offset. If you open up the wrench, then you have a couple more devices, which this is nudge. I would consider this to be like, nudge is a very different definition to me, where you're kind of moving stuff either early or late, and that's not what this does. This means that if I have, let's say, a step right here, then I can shift everything one step over to the left or the right. Then if I wanted to, I can flip this, and I can also randomize this, which is great for kind of just getting started. Something that is really cool is that all of these have independent timings and step amounts. So if you wanted to create, polyrhythms and whatnot by doing things like this, that's definitely available. And I would say, like, get in there and have some fun with it. Because this is all just MIDI notes, that means that you can, in theory, use MIDI channels and have things send out separately, to my knowledge. I haven't tried it, but that's just something to be aware of. Something that is kind of strange with this is that if you solo something, you can't solo something else, even if you hold Command or Shift. Maybe that's an oversight, maybe that's a bug or something, but there's that. And then you can see that all of these have a groove option, to where if you come over here, you can change the groove and the shuffle and the accent and stuff. So I want to talk about this because there's some revisions that I would like to see changed personally. For one, it's a little bit cumbersome to turn on the groove, but then come into this and then enable the groove in a different way. I hope that this gets an overhaul because there's a lot more that I would like to see done. But the most important thing that I think is missing from this is something that I made a point of over here. So, in music production and rhythm, we have something called rubato. And what that is, I'm going to have a video over this, is humanizing, and not just the term humanizing, but making things sound like they're either slowing down or speeding up without changing the rhythm too drastically. So, if we have this hi hat pattern here and we listen to this, sorry, it should be here, then it's a straight rhythm. But if you look at the division of time here on this particular pattern, you'll see that some of this is late, and then a little bit less late, and then a little bit less late. And what you have is a rhythm like this. This is the kind of music that I make with these rhythms and stuff. You might refer to them or familiarize with things like Jay Dilla. We call it halftime music. It's like heavy bass, hip hop, and whatever. The point of this, though, is that one of the most important features that I hope that they include with this is a per step timing offset. And there's only a handful of sequencers that actually exist on the market that can do that. My favorite one is Patterning 3 for iPad, actually. But that was probably the biggest letdown that I've had. And I can't help but mention it because, like, I'm not trying to take away from the coolness of the sequencer, but just as a means of what could make this, one of the best sequencers to just have. But because I can't set some stuff early and I can't set some stuff late, even though there is technically the quote unquote humanize and the swing and all that other stuff, it doesn't quite give me the same vibe. It doesn't quite give me the same feel. And so I would love if there was a way to do that. One thing that I think would be an elegant solution to that is to be able to click on one of these, kind of like so, and then maybe perhaps the stepwise thing will pop up. I think that this froze. Yeah, everything froze. Oh, there we go. It's catching up. It's thinking. Okay. Yeah, so we click on a note like this, and then maybe there are some other adjustments that you can utilize down here in order to change the offset and whatnot. You can, in theory, if you're doing drums or you have something that's sequenced different, change some of the timings in different ways. But the problem is that I don't want to change the timing of the whole thing. I want to change individual note placements. And so it kind of defeats the purpose. But that being said, you can, if you have drums, utilize the note effects. So there are things that exist like humanize, for example. There are things like quantize, which is another note effect. And then you've got some other stuff that you can get into with other cool note effects that there's just an extensive list of things that you can utilize. So the thing with it, though, is that because even though using this is a possibility and whatever, I'm still going to do it by hand because you can't get this out of a sequencer. It's very difficult to get the right pocket, and precision in pockets is such a thing to me that I had to spend this much time talking about it. I apologize. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about a key filter, which we can toss in here. And because we have something like this, we don't want to go too crazy with this, but maybe just a few notes here. And then what we can do is set this to a scale, which I think is how most people are going to use this. Let's do F sharp Phrygian. You can change the notes of these individually. You can also set them to different steps if you want it to make it kind of like an arpeggiator or something that is a little bit of both, which is kind of cool. So maybe we can set this up, we can set that down, and we don't need to do all of this, but it does exist. And then we can just pull up something very simple like an FM4 bell. So we'll do that and then have a little bit of this. And now if I hit play, I'm going to also grab a transpose. Sorry, note transpose. And you can hear that, you know, it's going to kind of be all crazy and stuff. And that's why it's really important to kind of use this sparingly if you're going to use this as something to create melodies and stuff. But if you mute all of this and you solo this to maybe just one or two, this is probably where this is going to make a lot more sense to you. And then, of course, like I said, you can also utilize the groove to change the, well, to change all this stuff. So check this out. And of course, like, again, this is just a very basic demonstration about how this works. But that being said, for me, because this I think is going to work best with drums and to get cool, crazy rhythms and stuff, which I'm going to show you some cool stuff if you're still here at the video here in just a second. Yeah, you can start to see why I think it would be so important to be able to kind of offset certain steps individually. So yeah, that being said, I still think that this is cool. I'll most likely use this for a lot of melody generation. You can also combine this with a lot of other things that will just give you a bunch of random ideas. And I love that they added the dice. That's really cool. That's a great way to just like jump into some inspiration, because it's like every song or like every melody or something has to begin with some notes. And having access to that and just be like, I have no idea what I want, boom, start messing with it and start tampering is really probably the biggest draw of Bitwig in the first place. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some things that can also be kind of interesting. One thing that I have here is a drum machine, and I just, as a random thing, I've created a 128 rack, which if you look at this, it's a multi-sample, and I've highlighted all of these, right clicked and gone to distribute select equally. So every time I play this, if I change the select knob, as you can see, then it will play a different sample. I've made this possible by randomizing this, and so every time I hit the note, it's going to do something different. And then I've duplicated this times 8, and so now all of these are randomized sounds of the same pull. You can do, all kicks, all snares, all hats, whatever, but just for the sake of demonstration, I've used that. Now, one cool thing that you might want to check out or whatever is adding some kind of stepper here, stepwise, and you can also group this and change this into a note effect selector. So by utilizing this and letting this do its thing, you pretty much are just going to have an endless cycle of different kinds of rhythms that will have different samples. So if you combine that with something like the recording here, and then you hit play, you pretty much got a whole slew of different effects and percussion sounds to work with to create very interesting loops. This reminds me a lot of the Life plugin that I use quite a bit, but if you recall in the Life plugin, I have the same complaint about the sequencer that is kind of the same deal, where if you look at this and you open this up to the edit knob, you can nudge stuff and move it a little bit early, but you can't move things on an individual step, and that drives me crazy. But yeah, this isn't meant to be a life replacement. It's just a matter of, hey, here's another way that you can get some cool things. But there are lots of creative possibilities that you can utilize with a step sequencer in general. So yeah. Now, the cool thing that I haven't even like touched on yet, which we're getting ready to get into, is that there's actually 2 new main grid devices, and they're sick. To be honest with you, the poly grid devices are actually my favorite of the entire update, and I'm going to tell you why. So there's 2 main ones. We have the pitch shifter and the frequency shifter. I want to talk about the pitch shifter first because this says frequency shifter plus, but pitch shifter plus to me is actually even more insane. If you can't see what's going on already, which there's a couple of other grid things that just very quickly, I can't remember what this is called. It's called Dome, so it's a new device. If you're familiar with the grid, I am not super familiar with the grid. So I wouldn't be the person to talk to about this. Check out Polarity's channel because he would be the person that would explain all this. But the pitch shifter in general. So it works very similarly to the pitch shifter device that is within the device menu, but the difference is that it now has an FM insert. And so what I can do with this is take a wavetable and insert it here, and now I can apply FM to the pitch shifter. And it also has key tracking. So if I were to turn this off, and let's just start from here. I think that this is just a Reese, if I'm not mistaken. Let me make sure that this is going to do things here. Maybe I killed something. Okay, so let me delete this. There we go. All right, so yeah, just a Reese. Now I can start to utilize the pitch shifter to do cool things as I introduce the mix. So like you could just get wild sounds out of this. It's so cool. If I turn this off, then this is going to behave more like the pitch shifter in the device menu. But now that we have FM, if I start to pull this up, then we can scroll through the wavetable and just get, again, wild sounds. So let me go ahead and change this into this. And then what I'm also going to do is change this into here. And then let's go ahead and turn this off. I'm going to pull this into just a sine wave because this is where you're going to notice the biggest differences. But yeah. Yeah, super cool. So by utilizing this, this is actually a really handy tool for making metallic plucks and like leads and stuff. Because if you add some delay, comb filtering, distortion, convolution reverb, maybe an amp sim, and you compress the, or sorry, you clip this, then you can get some really cool stuff kind of like this. I will say you need to be careful with this because obviously as you hear, like I'm trying to not go too high up because it can get kind of crazy and shrill and whatnot. But yeah, there's just some great stuff to be had with this kind of thing. And I hope that they figure out some way to add this FM type deal to the device menu. One thing that I would say that they could add is, sorry, this froze again, but I'll just talk while this loads. But one thing I would say is that you can add the carrier slash modulator rack that you have within the vocoder, but in the context of the pitch shifter. And then, of course, add the key tracking and stuff. But this thing in general is super cool. And there we go. This is by far one of my favorite devices that Bitwig has added because of how experimental it is. Now, the frequency shifter plus is also really cool. We've got a couple of things that you can utilize. For one, because of this, we don't have FM, but we do still have phase modulation, which is nice. We have different delays, and then we have, I don't remember what the name of this thing is, the feedback direction. So not only do you have feedback on this, but you also have a direction on this now. And yeah, it just kind of manipulates the frequency shifter in a strange way. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what that sounds like. I'm going to go ahead and turn these other devices off so that way you can hear exactly what's happening. We can also turn on a delay here, which will just manipulate the frequency shifter, well, delay. We can change this to something that's also synchronized, which is cool, or tempo synced. But if we set this to hertz, which is generally what I like to look for within a frequency shifter, and we set this to like 4 hertz and we turn this on, then we'll get the ring mod feel. And typically speaking, as I was doing this before demoing this, if we have something that's kind of like a Reese, where we turn this up, then this is where this is going to make a lot more sense. Yeah, so like I said, we can also add PM by dragging this over here, and this is going to pretty much just add phase modulation to the entire sound. And like I said, we can just get some really cool sounds out of this. Yeah, super sick. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of hop in between and start doing stuff with this in order to just experiment with new sounds and things that you probably haven't maybe thought of before. So for the most part, that covers the majority of the features. One thing that they did mention in the new notes, sorry, before I go on, there are a couple of other grid devices and grid additions, but I'm not going to cover those because, to be honest with you, I don't know what they do and I need to do more research with what that is. But one of the main things that they said that they added was a new revamped audio system, which I don't know much about, for one. So if you look here on the audio, then they have this new kind of selection menu. The one thing that I saw is that they have combined devices, and I hadn't seen that feature before, so that could be super handy. What would be nice is if I had something like loopback and I can set the input to be not only the volt, but also, sorry, I'm just looking here. Yeah, not only the volt, but also the loopback. So that way I can sample directly from YouTube or my computer or something. That would be super cool, but I haven't messed with it. And then also there's supposed to be just overall quality improvements for loading times for projects and presets, which I have not seen a significant difference in. We demoed this on the live stream yesterday, but I mean, one thing that you can kind of just check out is if I were to pull up like a relatively finished project, which will go to new one. This is a 15 megabyte project. This took me about 40 seconds in the Bitwig, what's it called? In the Bitwig stable version or the most recent version, and then pulling this up within the beta. I think we timed this was about 41 seconds up here, but if you kind of just look at how that pulls up. So I don't know how much of a difference this is supposed to make, if at all, not from pulling the project up, but from activating the audio engine, or maybe the project pulls up, but activating the plugins and stuff is what takes a while. But as you'll see, this will kind of shoot up, and then as it gets towards the end, it'll kind of bottleneck. So maybe, I'm not really sure if it's the project itself. It's like, oh, the project is ready, but the loading plugins and stuff still can kind of take some time. Because even though this project isn't huge from a means of a lot of tracks, there are a lot of plugins that are placed on this. So yeah, I'll go ahead and play the beginning of this track. It's something that we did on stream, and then I'll wrap up my thoughts, and then we'll kind of go from there. Yeah. So as far as future wish lists and stuff, there's really not much that I could ask for. Really, I think that I need to probably just beat a dead horse. But one thing that I would love to see is being able to transpose samples in repitch mode. That would probably be the number one feature. I'm not even going to mention themes, other than stating that I'm not going to mention themes. At this point, they know. But one thing that I would like to see is maybe some additions to their mixing stuff, like a limiter pro or something of the sort. And then this is a long shot, but I would really like them to actually make a dedicated multi-band compressor. I know that you can utilize this in effects 2 and 3, but there's a phase shift. But there's something to be said about multi-band compression that can utilize both upwards and downwards, but something that is like built in with the phase and stuff that is more consistent. um yeah, it's hard to say, but the OTTs that I can build inside of Bitwig do not sound nearly the same quality as something like the Fuse compressor or even the OTT respectively that is a free version. And thankfully there's a free version which you could just use that, but I would just like to go like 100% in the box and just use Bitwig without you having to utilize anything else. To which, if they added a wavetable maker or some kind of harmonic series drawer or something, harmonic series drawer, I don't know, some kind of harmonic series device that can be exported as a wavetable, I think it would be great. For some reason, there's like a bunch of wavetable synths and stuff. Sorry, let me pull up Polymer that are on the market that are like, oh, you can import wavetables from Serum, but like I don't want to do that. I want to use whatever this is supposed to be and make a wavetable and make changes to it and whatnot. And I know that's probably a big ask because that's a very in-depth synth processing thing, but I think that is something that would really help make this into just an even more crazy machine. So with that, I can't really cover everything, and I don't want to spend too much time on feature requests. But one thing that I love about Polymer is the modularity of how this works in blocks. I think that if they had a plus button here to where you can add more blocks to where the device workflow becomes semi-modular, that would be freaking awesome. The other thing is that I would love to see the ability to expand the device menu and have something to where you can work vertically. That way, the workflow behind this would be so much faster. So they already kind of like nodded to this workflow from a suggestion that I had, not saying that they took my suggestion, but from this. But do you see how you have a drop down menu and how you can kind of swap between devices and whatnot? I really want them to lean in on that with the device workflow. Kind of like how you have here, but with your chorus and phaser and all that other stuff, with pulling up devices to where you just quickly are building these blocks and chains now that make everything a lot easier to work with. The reason why I bring this up is because while you do technically have the flexibility with how you want to change your devices and routing and stuff, I don't like that I can only see one lane at a time whenever I'm trying to work. Just because, especially with the kind of sound design that I do, you can see that like I have to change in between these different things and keep track of what they're supposed to do. Sorry, that's a bug, but yeah, being able to modify that and see everything at a glance would be super helpful, especially with bass design in particular. Yeah, so what if I want multi-pass inside of Bitwig? Okay, let a man dream. Um, so that being said, I think that probably the other thing that everyone is asking for, and the reason why I don't really use the grid a lot, is because if I spend all of my time developing, say, a compressor in here, I can't save this as a rack. And one thing that you can do, which is not the most elegant solution, is maybe pull up an effects grid, pull up your compressor, grid compressor, copy all of this that is not within the signal flow and go Command X, open this up, paste this right here, I believe, something of the sort. And now I have to connect this, and then I connect this to the output wherever that went. But as you can see, the solution to this is not very, yeah, it's rough. But if I were able to kind of take this and just place this as a whole entire rack inside of a thing, then we can start to kind of like do the whole two simple things put together, to where you build these crazy devices and then you just recall the device by right clicking or something, maybe something like user, and um, being able to pull those up very quickly. And that way, the initial starting point of the grid would take a lot of time. But as you start to work for yourself and you build these custom devices, then you just recall them and you keep adding to it. And this, like, eventually at some point, you're going to have a crazy massive patch, in the same way that I do with the other things that I do that are relative towards modular. But yeah, aside from the audio stuff and the device workflow improvements and the mixing things, like, these are all such small things that do not deter me from making music. I know that some people want some other features, like somebody asked for audio to MIDI, which I get. Some people probably want stem separation, which I get. But yeah, I think for the most part, I really just want higher quality mixing things, and you know, the other wish list or whatever are things that like is a wish list, not like a this needs this or I'm not going to use this DAW anymore. But I'm curious, what other kinds of things would you all like to see? Perhaps a slicer. I know that some people want that. Yeah, I'm drawing blanks here with other requests that I want people to look at or whatever. But Bitwig is so comprehensive now. I've made my best music inside of Bitwig now. I continue to open this up every single time that I stream, and this is just such a lovely software to work with. It is the most flexible DAW that I have ever encountered. And I've used a lot of different DAWs. Whatever workflow you prefer, it likely has something really cool and creative, and something that is slightly different that really draws you to engage with the program, even if you're not an expert on experimentation slash sound design or whatever. So if you've never used Bitwig, I would say give it a try. It's okay if it's not for you, but definitely give it a go. And for those of you who do use Bitwig, what do you all think about the new update? What do you think about, future wish list features, blah, blah, blah? And what would you like to see from the channel? Or perhaps maybe I can go more in depth on some of the new things as well. Yeah. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, let me know. I also have the Discord, which there's a link in the description. If you want to check out my music, it's available at alckemy.com, as well as my presets, courses. You can book lessons with me on alckemy.com. Or again, just liking the video and leaving a comment is insanely helpful, even though even though it seems small. So thank you so much. Thank you to Bitwig. Yeah, I think that we've got some good things going here. I'll be live later today, and we're going to be cooking some sounds and having some fun, where I'll be making more drum stuff. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all in the next one.